Hello and welcome to watch DropZone Conifer collection tutorial. After you have downloaded the package from the marketplace and add it to your project, um, you will get this DZ Conifer collection folder to your project, and under the maps you can find this DZ Conifer collection overview map or level. Double click and you will be in the same spot as I am. You will see all the 60 trees, 6 species, 10 variants from each species. They're all different meshes, not just little tweaks. They're all different trees. Okay, let's go into the package. What it includes and how to use it. Okay, we already went through the first folder, which only includes this overview map. This is all you will get. Those demo levels I made with Mavis Conifer Forest package. I have it here because I used it in demo videos, and you have the links in the marketplace. In my product info, you will have the links to those videos. Check them out. You will see how they fit into the environment. Okay, after the maps, we will have master materials and instances. And I have two master materials. Other is for leaves and needles, and other is for trunk and branches. And then there is master material instances for leaves and needles, an instance for trunk and branches. These master material instances are very important, and especially the trunk and branches is something you can adjust all the branches at the same time. But if you want to do tweaks to the leaves and needles, I suggest you use the tree's own instance for leaves and needles. But anyhow, two master materials, an instance made of them, instances made of them. Then there are a few material functions. There is material function simple tree wind. It's basically the simple grass wind, which is Unreal Engine's own material function, but I have a little bit made my own version of it. It fits better to leaves for the trees. And then there is material function wind for leaves and material function wind for trunk and branches. So these are the wind effects. Of course, master materials uses this. And then the next folder is material instances for every tree species. Not all the species, all the trees in the same one species will not use all the same instances. For example, all the one species can use about, often they use 3 different barks. For example, pine tree, first 3 or 4 has the same, and then we have different. And the same goes with the upper bark. And then the last trees will use different barks again. So the same goes with every other trees. So they are not all having the same barks. They're having about 3 different barks, and the pine tree has some other trees too have different barks. Of course, this you will see it more clearly because it's the very different kind of bark, the upper one. Okay, so trees use about 6, 7, maybe 8 different instances, and you can see them here under the different species. And there are only 2 that uses leaf and needles material. It's this needles. Everyone has these needles. Of course, Monterey cypress has a different kind of needles, but it's a conifer also. And fir has a different kind of needles. But they all will use this same dead twigs, and it also uses a leaf material because it's two-sided and a little bit different kind of than a trunk material. Okay, we will go these instances through in a very detailed level, but let's go through first the package. After these material instances for different trees, we have meshes, of course. Under fir, there are 10 different static meshes for fir tree. Monterey cypress has 10. Monterey pine has 10. Pine, stone pine, and Torrey pine. Like I have advertised, there are 60 different kind of trees with 6 different species. All are different meshes. So 10 variants per one species, and 6 species and 10 of each. It's 60 different trees. And then there are last folder textures. Not last, under it we have barks. There are quite many bark textures in this package, like I told. And these textures include the diffuse texture, and most of the textures will have also this mask if you want to use roughness and ambient occlusion. And there's also height map for blending different barks. You can blend textures, bark textures in trunks and also in branches if you want to. So you can use up to 4 different bark textures in one tree. 2 in trunk and 2 in branches if you want to. But there are a few textures like this cut don't have this PPR texture. It's not needed really, and there are a few others that doesn't have the mask texture, like these dead branches, and they're very thin branches that don't need that kind of texture. But like you see, almost all the textures have it. Little twigs texture doesn't have it, but almost all the real park textures have three textures: diffuse and mask and normal. Okay, then leaf and needles. Like you see, these twigs are under the leaf needles because they use the leaf and needles material. That's why they are here. And then there are fir needles, and it's normal, and Monterey cypress, normal. Then Perlin-noise. In material, leaf material or needles material. In this case, because there are conifers, it's more like a needles material. You can use Perlin-noise to give a little bit of variation if you want to. As default, these trees don't have any Perlin-noise in them now. They're just the way they are. Then the last one, pine needles, and its normal map. And these templates are just for the master material, that you know if the texture is missing, base color, you can see that here you should put the normal map and here you should PBR mask. But of course, if you don't use this PBR, you don't want to ambient occlusion and roughness map, you don't want to use them. Like as default, I don't use them. I don't think it was too necessary. The static values, the constant values were fine enough. I don't want to use too much texture memory because I didn't see it give any advantage really. And then there is this kind of a wind map. Uh, in my leaves needles, I'm using gradient. You see that these leaves all start from the bottom, so I can use a gradient that the leaves are not moving from the lower part, and the upper part moves more. But there is an opportunity in the material instance is to use wind map, so you can use a texture gradients to make leaves move. But I changed settings to use. I wanted to use this gradient. It's a more reliable, really. But there's also option to use on texture. So you kind of will have a gradient black here and goes white here if you have these kind of textures. But if you have like this, then you should have black here and white here and this area and so on. You have to cut. Where you have cut it is twigs. You have to do also a little bit like a cutted area for the gradient to use for a wind map. But this package doesn't use it, but it's just an option if you want to use these materials for your own trees or something like that. Okay, we have gone now through what is in the under the package main folder. Then we should maybe go through how the wind effects are done, what kind of parameters you want to use when tweaking the trees, maybe as you want to. We could watch first mm, the vertex colors, because wind effects uses vertex colors, and also the spark changes use vertex colors. So if you now try to go to the mesh paint and see the vertex colors, you don't see anything. And that's because I'm selling nanite trees. And when nanite is enabled, you just can't see vertex colors. So first thing you have to do is edit this mesh. You don't need to uncheck this. You uncheck the nanite support and apply changes. After that, if you go to the mesh paint, you will see the vertex colors. So if you have seen this problem and didn't know what happens, here's the reason. Okay, I have used two vertex colors for wind and one for bark. And here you can see the red vertex color. But maybe we should first look the green. Green defines how much wind affects to this tree. Not the whole tree swinging wind, like you can see that they are swaying the whole tree. This is not that wind. But the wind that moves branches, it could move also the trunk. So that's why the trunk has been left almost black. There can be some green in the upper part of the trunk because that moves with the wind. So basically it becomes more greener and greener when we go away from the trunk, like you can see. And it should be bright green at the end of the end of the branch. And of course you can paint and move. You can just remember the channels are here. If you watch the green channel, these are the channels you're painting. So if you want to paint green, just leave the green checked. And then you can with shift and left mouse button, it takes off the color so it comes more black. No movement with the wind then, and just the left button and it paints this green. And here you can adjust the size of the brush. If you want a bigger brush, and the strength. I recommend strength being something between 0.2 and 0.3 because otherwise it's too strong and you can't get a good gradients kind of painting, so it will not behave nicely. Okay, but there is also other wind. I wanted to give variation to the movement, so I have added red channel also, and I have added red here and there. So not all the branches go to the same direction with the same tempo. They will have a different sequence, and so it gives a more natural feeling, like you can see here. The trunk is swaying, and it has also two different wind directions, and you can adjust parameters how it moves. And it's also same for branches. It has different tempo and faster tempo than the trunk, and they are also using those same wind directions. So it goes quite naturally because they use the same directions, and just tempo is based on the trunk tempo also. And that's about the normal wind effect that whole trees swaying wind is it just have parameters in the trees material instance for trunk and branches, and it uses the gradient, and you can give the gradient also a level how fastly it starts to move the whole tree. Okay, but this green and red are important, and it's important not to have green or red here in the lower area of the bark, the trunk. You can have it here in the top, but not in the trunk, in the lower part. It will act stupidly if you have. So, but you can take a copy and make your own versions of the wind if you want to. Of course, you have parameters to adjust the wind, but if you want to play with these vertex colors. Then we have a blue channel. Of course, if I would want to adjust this blue, I leave only this checked. And this is giving, telling the material where this mesh, where the bark 1 changes to bark 2, as you can see. And you just be careful if you want to play with these settings and just paint carefully that also the roots will be covered with black because it looks funny if your tree is in a slope and you can see the roots and there's swing. Doesn't look very natural. Anyhow, so blue is for barks and green and red are for the wind. And you have to disable nanite if you want to adjust these settings. Okay. And of course, after you have done the tweakings, you must enable nanite support and apply changes and save. Of course, you can just right click Nanite, and if you can choose this all, enable Nanite for selected, so you don't have to do it separately, or disable. You disable all, do the tweakings, and then come here, select all, enable Nanite, and then save all at the same time. Okay. What will first come into your mind when you add this package to your own project is that okay, maybe these are not perfectly, they don't match perfectly about lighting. They may be too dark or maybe too bright. And you want very quickly to make them look good in your own environment. So what I recommend is, for a fast way to do it, master material instances for trunk and branches, for example. Why? Open this. And I have this bark color tint. Okay, I can check this. I have two because there are many trees that use this. Okay, now this has taken the template. But I can check that in the final version this is done a little bit better because we want to maybe this branch does use only one bark version, so there is no assigned texture for the bark too. So that's, and now it started to use this. But the basic method is that you come here and you make it darker and press OK. You see the barks got darker. And if I want to see that also this upper part comes darker, I need to do some tweakings. But basically almost everything became darker at once. Here at the upper part is also it's brighter. But this will give you a quicker way to do the modifications. I can check these for the final version, so it will, just by adjusting this, you will get all the material, all the textures that uses the trunk and branches material will be lighter or darker at the same time by just using this. And when we have this enabled, we can adjust the Park 2 tint also. For the leaves and needles, because we have different needles here and we have different needles here. The cypress is very special, and all others uses the same texture, maybe different size and maybe pass how the light goes through the needles is a little bit adjusted differently, but this uses the same needle. But maybe it's better they can have their own settings, but they only have this one real needle material instance. So It's only one for each species, so just come here, enable this, because now this comes from the master material instance. Check it and then adjust it. And all the same species trees will change the darkness or brightness. Of course, you can tint it to whatever color you want, and then you can have more saturation or decrease saturation. Okay, if we take this pine as an example, because it uses two bark materials, what are the parameters that we can adjust to give different look or that it behaves differently in wind? We can go this through. Okay, first is use two barks in trunk. If this is checked, then you will have more texture slots here. What does this not have this mask texture is because I have not wanted to use this map textures. Also, I didn't want to use this roughness. I don't think they give too much anything I want. But the reason why this is here, even though I have unchecked this, is because I use this height map. This have or displacement map, whatever you want to call it. The red is for displacement, green is for roughness, and blue is for ambient occlusion. So this blending, which I have a few settings here, use bark 2 height map for blending. No, I use 1 because this is rougher bark, so it gives more variation than this. So I want to use 1, that's why this is unchecked. And use inverted blending. It means the height map have darker and lighter areas, and this just inverts the black and white. So you can check which fits your bark blending better. So that's about having one or two barks. I uncheck these two, so they come from the master material instance. Then we have color desaturation for bark 1 and color tint, and the same for bark 2. And this color tint, what I showed you already, you can make it darker or brighter or tint to the different colors. Like you can see now, if I adjust this, it goes only brighter or darker. But if I want trees to be a little bit more yellow or a little bit more towards the blue, I can adjust it to fit, just to fit your own project. If you feel that the color warmness or color it's not doesn't fit perfectly, you can adjust it here. And just this desaturation, of course, desaturation means the higher level, it goes more towards the black and white, and if you have a negative value, it gives more color to the textures. Basic things. Texture slots for diffuse, basic base color, and this is a mask, like I said, displacement, roughness, and ambient occlusion mask. And then there is a normal map, and the same for the bark too. The mask, you could see when you enable one of these maps, ambient occlusion or roughness map, if you want to change it. Okay. Texture settings, I already mentioned these. If you want to use this bark's height map or this bark's height map for blending these textures, that means the area here how it blends. Now this orange part goes between these. These parts that are a little bit how can I say it? Well, in between of these points that are a little bit higher from the middle of the trunk. And then inverted blending, I just mentioned, and this is the blend contrast. And if we check how it works, now it's a little bit softer. If I go to the negative, you will see that they change sides. So negative can be a quick fix if you have them the wrong way, but I wouldn't recommend it. One is the maximum, and then you can see the contrast is quite sharp. I have it in 0.3. I don't know, it's not maybe the best, but it's okay. It has a kind of contrast, but it fades, still fades. Could be 0.2. Alright, and invert it. If you want to see. Now you see that the darker areas goes in between, and this lighter thing comes on top of the bark. So I think this looks more natural. Alright, then we have tiling and offset. And the basic values are 0.5 and 1.0. And for the lower part of the trunk, if you want it to be in sync with this displacement, like you can see, this bark really has shapes, like all the barks. They really have shape. So if you want the bark match to that shape, you don't use the lower bark settings. In some trees, this might be something different than 0.5 or 1.1, but it's only in the fir tree and the last fir trees. But maybe it was so. I'm not really sure. But these are the right values you have. But if you want to change the bark 2 settings, it's okay. You can see, start styling more. So, but 0.5 is good. And same here. If you want to tile it less or more. And of course this is just, these are to give where it starts. Many times not too necessary to adjust this, but in case you want to. So this is for tiling and offset. I recommend using my settings, but just for you to know what these are for. Normal strength is a normal map strength. It's now 1.1. If I put 4, it gives a little bit more crunchiness. You see? 1, 2. I had it in 1.5. You can adjust it to your own as you want it. Okay. I'll make this a little bit larger so we can watch both at the same time more easily. Okay, other settings. These are just kind of these PBR settings. I've used the constant values, ambient occlusion 1, metallic 0, roughness 0.9, specular 0.3. Specular just makes it a little bit it gives some kind of daylight feeling a little bit more. I think it's good to have some specular, but it gives more contrast feeling when you take it off. You can see if I have much, it makes it maybe too bright. So a little bit specular and it's fine. And if we want to use those roughness, no, those masks, they give some kind of, when you're in the darker side, you can see that you can see the shapes a little bit more, but maybe it's a little bit too much. Maybe it should a little bit adjust these BPR masks, but everybody can do, for example, Materialize is a good free software for everyone, and you can maybe, if you want to, make a better ambient occlusion and roughness maps. But these work, but I don't think I need them. But they are there if you want to use them and try them and maybe do your own versions of them. Then maybe the most complex part, but basically it's a simple, but there are many parameters for the wind. And this is for the trunk and branches part now. We are in the trunk material instance of this pine tree. Okay, let's make this a little bit wider so we can see wind. Use same values in trunk and leaf materials. This means that also the leaf materials will have this trunk and branches wind because the branches move and these needles have to know where the branches are. So if they don't have the same wind, they will not be where the branches are or the twigs. But now they follow the twigs. They have their own wind. Like you can see, all the needles are moving in their twigs. And all the branches, the twigs, the branches, and the whole tree is moving. And the branches go to the different directions and they'll have very natural movement. But you have to remember that for example, this pine tree, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different material instances. 2 of them uses leaf and needles material, and 5 uses trunk and branches material. And all these 7 must have same values for one tree, that all the parts of this tree are in sync. It means all these dead branches, all the branches, leaves, these little gaps or whatever you call them, the cut part, they're all different parts of this tree. And if these settings are not the same inside one tree, they will fly wherever. So that's why these are not checked. These all come from the trunk and branches master material instance. Like I said, make the trees darker or brighter from the master material instance first, and then if there are parts like those branches that didn't come darker, maybe go to the tree itself and do it there. But you can adjust almost everything with from the master material instance. And with this wind, I have left all the trees unchecked this part because these trunks and branches they kind of behave the same way no matter what the tree is. Uh, Only with these leaves or needles I recommend to go to the specific tree, and these all pines use the same needle material, so adjust its wind settings there. But what comes to trunk and branches, use the master material instance. This. You will have the same section and these values come from there. Leave these unchecked and they will take the values from the master material instance. What comes to needles, go to the material instances of specific trees and select the tree, and there is one needles material, and there you can either take it from the this is the part that comes from the trunk, so you can see not checked, but wind only for leaves. You will have, you can check this and adjust because it only affects the needle wind for this particular tree or tree species. But we will come this later. Let's go through first this trunk. What these mean. First there is wind intensity branches, simple variation. This is kind of a simple grass wind. I have made a variation of it. It was a simple tree wind material function. So it gives a little bit swaying effect, and this is the value. If you go over 1, you will get a huge amount of wind, so be careful with this. And the wind speed just gives a speed value of the same little variation. Wind fade offset length, wind kill distance steer are connected. Wind kill distance means when you will want to kill the wind, because we don't want to our computer to create wind when the object is very far away. We don't see it, we don't need it. So this time I have killed the wind in 200 meters and it starts to fade away in 150 meters. So that's what these values are. And this comes from the master material instance of the trunks and branches material. Wind swing, this is for the whole tree swinging and you want to enable it. Wind swing for branches. Red vertex. If you want to have the red vertex color so you get variation to the branches movement, and they use the same wind swing in branches too, but this red vertex just is for variation. So I don't think it eats performance a lot. So according to my tests, I don't see a difference in frames. So keep it checked. I recommend. And wind direction, strength in branches, green vertex, strength in branches, red vertex. So the same wind swing also affects the branches, and this is the strength for that effect. It has a different tempo than the trunk, but it uses but you don't need to adjust it in many places. So you only give one swing speed for one direction and one swing speed for what other wind direction, and you give them here. Wind swing gradient curve trunk. This just means how the trunk will bend. You can try adjusting it and you will see how the trunk behaves. This 5, I think it's very good. Wind swing power trunk. So this will, of course, adjust how much the trunk will bend. And this gradients adjust how it bends. And then there are wind directions. Wind direction 1 for swing and wind direction 2 for swing. And these are for the green vertex color. So you give values for the green vertex color, and then you give different values for the red vertex color. And that's how you get those branches move in a different tempo to different directions. It's kind of simple. You already saw how the branches were colored with red vertex, some of them, and all were colored with green, so they all are moving with the wind, and some just start to go to different directions with a different tempo. So these values for making them move in a different tempo, faster or slower, or the different directions. I think I have not used, but you can make them go up and down, or also by using this blue. But I haven't adjusted it in these trees as default. Okay, I think we have gone through all the settings according to this trunk and branches material. We can close it. And then go through the needles part, meaning leaves and needles. It uses this material. And master material instance leaves and needles will have these same settings, and mostly they come here if these are unchecked. But this is pine trees needles material instance. This use color variation box uses this Berlin noise texture. I mentioned that it is for variation as default. This tree doesn't use it, but if you want to, this makes this Berlin noise 300 meters large, and it gives a little bit brighter and darker variation for the trees if you want it. But as default, it's not used. Then there is the same settings as for trunks. There is color desaturation. You increase it, it gets desaturated. You give a negative value and it gives more saturation, of course. Color tint, because it's unchecked, it comes from the master material instance, which is good because if you want to tint all the needles at the same time, you can just give more brightness or darkness, and they fit better to your own project. Texture, there is only color and normal. I don't need anything more. And then there is normal power. which is 3 at the moment. You can try to adjust it and see how it affects. These other settings are those other PBR settings. I keep a constant value, metallic 0, roughness 0.5, because these needles are a little bit shiny, a little bit kind of wax surface, so you can see there's a little bit shininess in them. So if you want it rougher or shinier, you can just adjust these settings. You can see it changes. I think 0.5 is good. Ambient occlusion is 1. Specular, giving a little bit of light. Doesn't look so very contrast. There isn't too much contrast. Specular, a little bit more like real world feeling. And then there is this part again. Wind, use same values in trunk and leaf materials. Of course, they need to be same only for one tree, but I recommend giving these only in the master material instance and leave these unchecked, so you can adjust this from the one place. And we went already through this section. Just remember, if you make a mess with these settings, just reload the package again. But a good idea is to take a copy of the mesh, and you will then you can make variations. I just warn you that it's very easy not to notice all the things. So when you get closer, oh, my needles aren't attached to the branches or something like that. So you need to be careful, because many things may look very good when you watch it from far away, and then when you go close, you just realize that, oh, I adjusted this and that, and it doesn't work. You can see very nice wind effects, and it goes with all the trees. Branches aren't moving the same direction, like you can see. If you want to see the accuracy of the textures, I think they're quite good. I'm kidding, they're very good. Amazing. And if we go to watch the Monterey cypress needles, the accuracy is quite amazing. And see, in this wind for leaves, there's not only the same movement all the time, there is also variation. And the variation is for intensity and speed. So the speed and intensity of these leaves is on the move all the time. So even though the movement is from the simple grass wind, the intensity and speed are varied all the time, so it gives more natural feeling. Very nice and very cheap, this wind effect, I think. Of course, if you have a hurricane, this wind is not maybe the best, but if you have a normal summer breeze or the normal wind conditions, I think this is very cheap and very nice. It takes a lot of effort to paint the vertex colors. I have done it for you, so all these 60 trees have vertex colors. They might not be perfect, but they are very well done anyhow and very carefully done. Of course, I wouldn't dare to show you these if they weren't done well. This is, like you can see, branches are moving, whole tree is moving, needles are moving, everything is attached. I have bought many packages from the marketplace and I've never seen them being perfect. But this time it's almost so. I have put a lot of effort to make this well. Okay, so this was the wind part for trunk and branches. And then wind for leaves, wind intensity leaves. It is this little movement that the needles have, that sway. You control the intensity with this. And because these are needles, not leaves, the intensity level is very low. If you put it to 0.3 or 0.5, it's too much. And the speed also maybe can't be too high. If you want to have more speed, then you maybe want to have a little bit less intensity. But what comes to broadleaves and different kind of trees, not conifers, then this intensity and speed will be much more because needles are not turning and taking wind the same way as the normal broadleaves. And this invert linear vertical gradient. This means that if I want to invert the vertical gradient, if my leaf textures are upside down, I want to invert it. But they are, the textures are at the bottom of the needles are at the bottom of the picture, so I don't need to invert it. So, because the wind effect is using gradient, the gradient node that is from the engine's own node. This just means that if it's now from black to white, then it's from white to black, and black to white from up to down. So that's only for turning if your needles are not connected to the branch, are moving where they should be connected, then you use this. Use wind map texture. This was for the if you want to use wind map texture instead of gradient, you can enable this, and then you will have this box for the wind map, but we are not using it as default. Wind leaf curve. This must be quite high for this pine needle because this pine needle starts a little bit further than at the bottom of the texture. So I need black to where it starts. So this just adjusts the gradient. And when it starts to move, and I want this needle to be connected to the branch or to the twig, like you can see. So if I give it a value of 1, it will move more, but it will move from the bottom also a little bit. It's not totally connected then. But this too is good for this. I think cypress has a little bit lower value. I can't remember the fir, but you can test these values by yourself. Okay, this is a very nice feature. If you don't have this in your own materials, other trees, I suggest you really take this part to your own materials. Opacity for leaf thickness. This I have to show you. Let's take a little bit faster camera, maybe up to 6. Now you can see if I go very far away from my trees, This is what I love in Nanite. Nothing is changing, they're perfect. Now I'm not using virtual shadow maps. I could use them. They still give a good FPS, very good, very nice. Of course, when you have all the other environment, then of course it affects something. But all the necessary details are here. You have maybe seen many times that the needles or leaves disappear even if you have this preserve area unchecked. Epic made this preserve area checkbox for not leaves not disappearing because after a pixel is smaller, I mean the polygon or triangle is smaller than the 1 pixel of your resolution, then it disappears. And it's not good for leaves or grasses or something like this. So when there is much same kind of grass or needles or leaves, this just connects the point them together and they preserve their appearance better. But it doesn't, it's not enough many times. So I have this kind of opacity effect for needles and I want to show you. We have this pine tree here, and if I put the value of 1 here, it demonstrates how this would normally look. So you can see this is what happens if you have this kind of almost real kind of needles. They are very small, and when you go further, they don't look very nice. They look dead. And this happens with all the trees that doesn't have big enough leaves. And that's I know that using alpha mask or opacity mask isn't the one that is recommended with Nanite, but with conifer trees it's almost impossible to use just the cut part of the leaf card. You just have to mask something out to get a precise shape. How can you, for example, cut this out without a mask? I don't think there is any way. Or something like this. Okay, you can go maybe a different approach than this fair, but anyhow, if you only have to cut it part, I have seen in architectural trees that the leaves are disappearing because I can't use this opacity boost for showing. Now if I go further, I increase the value too. Okay, almost there, almost there. Maybe 4 would be enough because I don't want them to thicken too much. But I had it in 5 and I have tested this before and it's okay. You can of course decrease or increase this opacity intensity at the first place, but normally it's in 1. And if it goes under about 0.8, it disappears immediately. Okay, it doesn't disappear immediately. In this case, it's 0.5. But you can try to make the needle sharper or so, but I really don't need to because these needles really are needles. They are sharp enough. But of course, I don't want to make them too big too fast. So you don't want to have it look like this. That's too much. So 4 or 5 is better. And start of effect, it means if I think it looks good for a particular time, for 50 meters or so, then it starts to thicken. But you know, even 50 meters are too long. We can see it's no good. 10 meters, it would be fine, but I don't see a reason for offset it in this case. It goes very naturally. When we go further, for 200 meters, it thickens the leaves, and it's enough. They will never disappear. And now you can use these kind of trees in your open world environments with no problems. And I can show you the FPS rate. This is the most good part in Nanite trees. When I'm in the distance, you can see the FPS rate is solid 120. And these trees are perfect. Oh, these trees seem to... I think I said I don't use virtual shadow maps, but I do use virtual shadow maps at the time. And you have been seeing that the frame rate is still fine. It's not bad. Even with the virtual shadow maps, it's fine. But if I take it off, it gives a little boost. But of course, we don't have shadows when we go further. But that virtual shadow map, it gives some kind of artifacts sometimes, and it's not maybe perfect, but I think it's of course it's much nicer, even though it's still in beta. A normal shadow map, it's cheaper for performance, of course. Okay, let's go through it. We have subsurface scattering, and this gives the power, so how much the light goes through the needles. In this case, spine needles, I give it 0.4 value. And many of these other conifers, it's 0.5 or something like that. And this subsurface scattering desaturation is, does leaf get more color or not, or the needle, when you watch it from the backlight here. I give it a little bit of more color, even though it doesn't pass too much light. But it gives, like in the broadleaves, it would, I think it would need even more to give that nice feeling that light goes through the leaves. But in the conifer, it's a little bit different. The light doesn't go so much through, but I think still it needs a little bit more color. And if you can see that even very close to the needles, the frame rates are quite high. I'm running this with 32 gigabytes of RAM and GTX 3080. So I have a good computer, and I have used this same computer, same setup with my demo videos. That uses the Mavis Conifer package as a base. I have erased the trees. Only the little seedlings are there from Mavi, and all the big trees are from this package. And you can see how it runs in 4K. And there was also a color tint if you want a more green or yellow tint to the subsurface scattering. And this leaf thickening is something, if you don't use nanite and you want leaf give keep their shape a little bit better when you go further. You can this also uses the world position offset to make leaf bigger, but with nanite it doesn't work perfectly. But so this is not used for in this package, but you get it anyway if you want to play with it. It makes leaves bigger as you get further, so your trees will be will be seen better. The leaves are not disappearing. But if you enable nanite just doesn't look the world position offset first. It kind of erases the pixels and maybe the left ones it makes bigger, and they don't preserve their shape as well. So with nanite this is not perfect, but it's still in this material if you want to use it in some for other purposes. For example, for architectural trees or something. But with nanite there are some problems. If you have very thin leaves, you need the opacity mask. Making the leaf bigger with nanite it doesn't help. Anyhow, I think I have gone through the settings of trunk and branches and leaves and needles. Op this opacity mask thing that makes the leaves needles stay. We have gone through the vertex colors. For bark was the blue one, and green and red for the wind. I hope you enjoy the package. I think this was all this time, and see you next time when more packages will come. Yes. Thank you, and goodbye.